I've really been hitting on this for the last couple of weeks with the Big Ten expansion, is that political and sports pundits often throw topics into an outrage blender. And that if you give them some thought and you give them some time, there's more normalcy to a lot of this expansion than we think. But we live in a 24/7 news cycle, and I have to have a strong opinion tomorrow. And I think the expanding Big 12, the expanding Big 10, the emerging Big 12 combined with the Pac-12, that with an expanded playoff, it's going to look more like college basketball. We won't care how people get in the tournament. The teams that should get in will get in, be it the SEC, the ACC. There'll be one from the Mountain West. We'll have 16 teams. And that we just live in a world of cable news, getting clicks, a lot of outrage, and that most things are layered. And also, Chuck, I believe that when anything new happens, it's a bit of an avalanche. And that over time, whether it's tech, everything has a gold rush quality, right? Everybody's in. Bitcoin, it explodes. Now it pulls back. The truth is Bitcoin will survive. And in 1 year from now, it will have survived its Great Depression, right? But the way media covers things, it's very in the moment and very urgent. So let me roll into your argument about college football. There is this sense that college football now is a bit of a mess. My argument is, wait, time out. I grew up in the 70s. I mean, sometimes the best team, you didn't even get a play for it. And you talk about the BCS era in college football more pragmatically. And I'd like you to dive into that a little bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, I got to say, I kind of disagree with some of what you're saying here, because I feel like the shift that you're talking about is slightly more dramatic than sort of the way you're perceiving it. Okay, you compare it to the NCAA basketball tournament. The NCAA basketball tournament still has the element of all the conference tournaments. And I think, like a lot of people, I've become someone who almost enjoys that week more than the actual tournament, because you're seeing teams who are playing for something that really is maybe the fulfillment of the kid's dream. You know, the kid goes to, Central Michigan or whatever. His dream is to just make the NCAA tournament. So you're seeing this game where the outcome of that will potentially be the greatest memory in that kid's life. Mm-hmm. Where with the big schools in the ACC and the Big Ten, they go into the season with the assumption they're going to be in the tournament. Right. And I feel like in general, we have kind of dramatically attempted to push both college basketball, but really college football, into a pro reality. And the difference that, the idea of USC and UCLA going into the Big Ten, it just, to me, that it changes a lot about what made college football separate from other sports. In the sense that, I think it's always really interesting to me that, how many years has it been that when the Mississippi Ole Miss football game meant a lot in the national picture? It's been a long time. There's still a lot of interest in that game. Okay, that game still has meaning in the state of Mississippi. I see what college sports are doing is here's a great, an ancillary point. Think of other controversies in your life. Adding the DH, having pro basketball players play in the Olympics. With these situations, I always recall there being two strong sides to this: somebody wanting it and somebody being against it. Who is for these conference realignments in college football outside of the networks and a few university presidents? Have you heard anybody who's a Pac-12 fan who's like, this is great? I mean, it's a strange deal. It's almost as though we feel as though we have no agency in this. It has to happen because money dominates everything, and it just has to happen. And we're, I think, oddly accepting that this is going to be a completely different sport to experience in 5 years. I mean, what you see on the field will not be as separate as the product we see now, but it seems like its social media will be totally different. I mean, it has hurt college basketball that it has become more of a pro-like game. When you watch a college basketball game now, especially if it's in the middle of the year, and the teams are good, what you're really seeing, to me, very often seems just like a lesser version of the pro game, where it used to be, in my relatively recent memory, like, the Big East had a style of play, the Big Ten had a style of play, the SEC had a style of play, and it almost rewarded the fan who cared and was knowledgeable and interested in this. And now I feel like they're almost making college football into something that will be more accessible for people who want to play college fantasy and for gambling, and to make sure that there's not that 1 week where like all the SEC teams play subdivision teams and there's no game for CBS. I feel like almost everything that has happened with this change has been unpopular among people who like football, and also kind of just weirdly assumed to be inevitable. And I don't think it was. I don't think this had to happen. Well, or do you feel like it had to happen?
Yeah. So I love college football. So it's had a 7-year.
Well, you're the only guy who really talks about this. I mean, this is also the weird thing, because ESPN is driving so much of this, because they dominate the college football telecast. You turn on all those ESPN shows, they're talking about basketball, even though college football is substantially more popular than the NBA. I feel like people aren't talking about this enough.
Oh, I talk about it constantly. I talked about college football today. Chuck, my feeling was there's a 7-year TV ratings and attendance decline in the sport. It is too insular and regional. And the biggest problem with the game, because it has no czar as a billion-dollar league. This is why the UFC stole so much real estate from boxing. There was no centralized voice until Dana White arrived. Like him or not, here's the message. I'm delivering it. Here's the fight card. We're all in. Boxing was Arum. Boxing was Al Heyman. It was Don King. There was no leadership. So college football has no leader. The problem being, of course, is all these power brokers, Saban, Dabo, they run the sport. They do whatever's good for their schedule. They put buys before the big games. So college football has an overwhelming issue, and I think this helps solve it. It's got a big game problem. On any given Saturday, Labor Day is wide open. It should be college football. There's 95 games. There are 2 I have to watch: Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon. The following week, there's 98 games. There's 1 I have to watch: Texas, Bama. Is that in college football, I don't get an expanded playoff forces, because you can lose multiple games now. USC will now play Wisconsin, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Iowa. They literally have a UCLA game and a Notre Dame game. The sport doesn't have enough big games.
But to me, you seem to be describing it as purely, and maybe not only this is your opinion, maybe it's the right opinion. You seem to be describing this purely as a form of entertainment. That there is really no difference between college football and the film industry or any of these things, because the entire filter you're going through on this is sort of like, how does this, and I think that that's not an unreasonable argument. I mean, ultimately this is all entertainment, and television does control all of this. But I mean, when you talk about the 7-year decline in ratings and revenue, I mean, I think all sports in the United States, with the possible exception of the NFL, are sort of eroding that. Like, they're losing. They're just because things are more splintered. And I think the regional quality of college football is kind of what, in some ways, insulated it. That it was, but by keeping that regional quality, there's still going to be interest in this sport, no matter what it sort of happens in sort of a national specter. Games in Florida are still going to be popular in Florida. So I think that, like, I mean, I don't know. When you watch a college game, to me, it means so much more than watching a pro game, because in a sense, if you watch the Giants play the Cowboys, okay, you're watching guys who happen to pay taxes in those communities. Everything just kind of changes and cycles through. When you watch, say, Stanford and Notre Dame, you are also thinking about the kind of kid who goes to Stanford, the kind of kid who goes to Notre Dame. Yeah. Like that even though these athletes are outside of that, and that certainly a lot of guys who maybe play football for Duke, maybe couldn't get into Duke in any other way or whatever, there's still the university sees them as an extension of the student body. And I think it's weird that we're just sort of accepting that the thing that made the sport unique is it's like the primary obstacle to its popularity. I don't think that it's troubling to me. Like I'm pretty disenchanted by what has happened. When I heard USC and UCLA were going to the Big Ten. I mean, it just at first I was like, so none of this matters. Like it was strange enough when the Big Ten had to suddenly have 11 teams. It took me a long time to get used to that. But now we realize, well, the Big Ten is just a name. It's just a word. Like it's like all these things like are just words, you know.
For the record, overwhelmingly, the media that covers college football and the fans who enjoy it agree with you. So I'm wrong often, generally with conviction, but that's just my take.